In a world where genuine emotions often get lost behind carefully crafted social media posts and rehearsed public appearances, something extraordinary happened that reminded millions of people what authentic human connection truly looks like. It wasn't a scripted moment or a planned photo opportunity. It was raw, real, and completely unguarded. When two people who have lived their entire adult lives under the intense scrutiny of cameras and critics finally let their walls down for just a few seconds, the entire world stopped to watch. What they witnessed wasn't just a goodbye between two individuals. It was a masterclass in vulnerability, strength, and the profound impact that genuine human emotion can have on complete strangers. This is the story of how one unscripted moment of tenderness broke through the noise of our busy lives and touched the hearts of millions, proving that in our increasingly disconnected world, nothing is more powerful than authentic human emotion shared without pretense or performance. The morning light filtered through the tall windows of Kensington Palace, casting long shadows across the polished floors where William had walked countless times before. Today felt different, though he couldn't quite put his finger on why. Perhaps it was the weight of the decision that had been months in the making, or maybe it was the knowledge that everything was about to change in ways that even he, with all his preparation and training, couldn't fully comprehend. Catherine sat at the antique writing desk in their private study, her pen moving steadily across cream-colored stationery. She had always been methodical about correspondence, but today she was writing letters that felt heavier than usual. Each word carried the weight of transition, of endings and beginnings that would reshape not just their lives, but the lives of their children and the institution they served. The palace had been unusually quiet that morning. Staff members moved with a subdued efficiency, their usual cheerful chatter replaced by respectful whispers. Everyone seemed to understand that this wasn't just another day in the life of the royal family. This was history in the making, though few could fully grasp the emotional toll it was taking on the two people at the center of it all. William had been preparing for this moment his entire life, yet nothing could have truly readied him for the reality of it. The theoretical had become practical overnight. The distant future had suddenly become the immediate present. He found himself thinking about his mother more than usual, wondering what advice she might have given him, how she would have navigated the complex emotions that came with such monumental responsibility. Catherine understood the weight her husband carried, perhaps better than anyone else could. She had watched him struggle with the duality of his existence, the public figure who belonged to the nation and the private man who simply wanted to protect his family. Over the years, she had become his anchor, the steady presence that allowed him to weather the storms that came with royal duty. Their children were at school, blissfully unaware that their lives were about to shift in fundamental ways. William and Catherine had decided to tell them together that evening, when they could sit down as a family and explain what the changes would mean. For now, they wanted to preserve their innocence just a little longer, to let them have one more normal day before everything became more complicated. The irony wasn't lost on either of them that their most private moments often became the most public. Every gesture, every expression, every interaction was scrutinized and analyzed by people who had never met them but felt they knew them intimately. It was a strange existence, living in a fishbowl where personal grief and joy became public property. Catherine finished her letters and walked to the window overlooking the palace gardens. The roses were in full bloom, their vibrant colors a stark contrast to the gray uncertainty that seemed to hang over everything else. She thought about how many mornings she had stood at this same window, watching the seasons change, watching her children grow, watching her husband evolve into the man and leader he had become. The preparation for this day had been meticulous. Meetings with advisors, consultations with constitutional experts, careful coordination with various government officials. But no amount of preparation could address the emotional reality of what was happening. This wasn't just a transfer of titles and responsibilities. It was the end of one chapter and the beginning of another, and neither of them could predict exactly what that new chapter would hold. William joined Catherine at the window, his presence a familiar comfort. They stood in silence for several minutes, both lost in their own thoughts. The weight of unspoken words hung between them, not because they couldn't communicate, but because some emotions were too complex for language. They had learned over the years to find peace in these quiet moments together, away from the cameras and the crowds and the constant demands of public life. The palace staff had been briefed on the day's schedule, but there was an undercurrent of emotion that no amount of protocol could address. These were people who had served the family with dedication and discretion, who had watched the children grow up, who had been part of the intimate fabric of their daily lives. Change was difficult for everyone involved, not just the principals. Catherine thought about the young woman she had been when she first entered this world. The transformation hadn't been easy or immediate. She had faced criticism and scrutiny that would have broken many people. But she had persevered, finding her own way to serve and contribute while maintaining her sense of self. Now, as she faced another major transition, she drew on that same inner strength. The constitutional implications of what was happening were significant, but the human implications were even more profound. This was a family dealing with loss and change and uncertainty just like any other family might. The difference was that their private struggles played out on a global stage, with millions of people watching and forming opinions about every decision they made. William had spent years preparing for this moment, studying constitutional law, learning about governance, understanding the delicate balance between tradition and progress that defined his role. But academic preparation was different from lived experience, and he was about to embark on a journey that no amount of study could fully prepare him for. The support system around them was extensive: advisors and staff and family members who understood the magnitude of what was happening. But ultimately, this was something they would have to navigate together as a couple and as a family. The decisions they made in the coming months would shape not just their own lives, but the future of the monarchy itself. Catherine had always been his partner in the truest sense of the word. She understood that royal duty required sacrifice, that personal desires often had to be subordinated to public responsibility. But she also understood that maintaining their humanity was essential, that the strength they drew from each other and their family was what made everything else possible. As the morning progressed, the weight of anticipation grew heavier. Soon, they would have to step into their public roles, to perform their duties with the grace and dignity that was expected of them. But for now, in these precious private moments, they could simply be themselves, two people facing an uncertain future with nothing but their love for each other and their commitment to something larger than themselves. The transformation that was about to take place would be visible to the entire world, but the emotional journey that brought them to this point had been largely private. The struggles and doubts, the moments of fear and uncertainty, the quiet conversations late at night, when the weight of responsibility felt almost too heavy to bear. These were the human elements that rarely made it into the official narratives. Yet it was precisely these human elements that would make the day so memorable, so moving to the millions of people who would witness it. In a world that often felt disconnected and impersonal, the genuine emotion of two people navigating a profound life change together reminded everyone watching that behind the titles and the ceremonies, these were real people with real feelings facing real challenges. The clock continued its steady march toward the moment that would change everything. William and Catherine knew that once they stepped out of the privacy of their home and into the public eye, they would belong to the world in a way that was both honor and burden. But for now, they held on to these last moments of the life they had known, preparing to embrace whatever came next with courage, grace, and an unshakable faith in each other. The phone call that changed everything had come 3 weeks earlier, on a Tuesday morning when Catherine was helping their youngest with breakfast, and William was reviewing briefing documents for his upcoming engagements. The voice on the other end was familiar but strained, delivering news that they had known would come eventually, but had hoped would remain in the distant future. Catherine watched her husband's face change as he listened, saw the exact moment when the weight of inevitability settled on his shoulders. Years of preparation couldn't ease the shock of reality. When he hung up the phone, they looked at each other across the breakfast table, both understanding that their lives had just shifted fundamentally, though the children continued eating their cereal, oblivious to the seismic change that had just occurred. The next 3 weeks had been a whirlwind of meetings, consultations, and careful planning. Constitutional experts were summoned, government officials briefed, and a complex web of protocols activated. But beneath all the official business, there was a family trying to process an enormous emotional transition while maintaining some sense of normalcy for their children. William found himself studying his father's face during their private meetings, looking for signs of how he was coping with his own impending change. The conversations they had during those weeks were unlike any they had shared before, frank discussions about duty, sacrifice, and the weight of serving something larger than oneself. These weren't the theoretical conversations they had engaged in over the years, but practical discussions about immediate realities. Catherine spent hours on the phone with her own family, drawing strength from their unwavering support. Her parents had been her anchor throughout her journey into royal life, providing the grounding and normalcy that kept her connected to who she was before the titles and responsibilities. Now, as she faced another major transition, their wisdom and love became even more precious. The children began to sense that something significant was happening, though they couldn't quite articulate what felt different. There were more serious conversations behind closed doors, more visitors to the house, and a subtle tension in the air that even young minds could detect. William and Catherine were careful to maintain their usual routines with the children, but they knew that soon they would have to find age-appropriate ways to explain how their lives were about to change. The media speculation during those weeks was intense, though most of it was based on educated guesses rather than confirmed information. William and Catherine found themselves living in a strange bubble where everyone around them knew what was coming, but the public announcement hadn't yet been made. It was like holding their breath collectively, waiting for the moment when private knowledge became public reality. Catherine's role during this period was both support system and strategic partner. She attended the planning meetings, offered input on ceremonial details, and helped navigate the complex emotional terrain that everyone was traversing. Her calm presence became a stabilizing force for not just William, but for the entire extended family and staff who were all adjusting to the new reality. The constitutional implications required careful consideration. Lawyers and advisors worked through complex legal questions while historians provided context about how similar transitions had been handled in the past. But history could only provide so much guidance. Each generation faced unique circumstances that required fresh thinking and creative solutions. William spent long hours in his study, reading through volumes of constitutional law and historical precedent. But he also spent time simply thinking, trying to envision what his new role would really mean in practice. The theoretical preparation he had received throughout his life was extensive, but the emotional preparation was something he had to work through largely on his own. The palace staff during those weeks showed remarkable professionalism and discretion. Many of them had served the family for decades, and they understood the magnitude of what was happening better than most outsiders could. Their quiet efficiency and emotional intelligence created a bubble of stability that allowed the family to process the transition without additional stress. Catherine found herself thinking about Princess Diana more than usual during this period. She had never met her husband's mother, but she felt a strange connection to her during these weeks of transition. Diana had navigated similar challenges, though under different circumstances, and Catherine drew inspiration from her strength and grace under pressure. The international implications of the transition were also being carefully managed. Diplomatic protocols had to be observed, foreign governments briefed, and relationships maintained through a period of significant change. The monarchy wasn't just a domestic institution, but a global symbol, and every aspect of the transition had international ramifications. Security arrangements during this period were particularly complex. The protection officers who surrounded the family had to adjust their procedures and protocols while maintaining the seamless security that allowed William and Catherine to function in their roles. The transition required coordination among multiple agencies and departments, all working to ensure continuity of protection during a period of change. The emotional toll on everyone involved was significant, though it was something that couldn't be quantified in briefing documents or procedural manuals. William found himself dealing with a complex mix of grief, anticipation, responsibility, and uncertainty. Catherine supported him through this while managing her own emotional response to the changes ahead. The children's schools were quietly briefed about the upcoming changes, ensuring that their teachers and administrators would be prepared to support them through the transition. Educational continuity was a priority for both parents, who wanted their children's academic and social development to remain as stable as possible during a period of family upheaval. Letters and messages of support began arriving from around the world, though the senders didn't yet know exactly what they were supporting. The intuitive understanding that something significant was happening seemed to resonate with people globally, even before official announcements were made. This outpouring of goodwill provided unexpected comfort during a difficult time. Catherine's wardrobe decisions during those weeks took on added significance. Every public appearance was scrutinized for clues about what might be happening, and her clothing choices became a form of nonverbal communication with the public. She worked with her stylist to select outfits that conveyed appropriate gravity while maintaining the elegance and approachability that had become her signature. The spiritual aspect of the transition was also important to both William and Catherine. They met privately with religious leaders, seeking guidance and blessing for the journey ahead. Their faith provided a foundation of strength that complemented the practical and constitutional preparations they were making. Sleep became elusive during those weeks. Both William and Catherine found themselves lying awake at night, their minds racing through endless scenarios and possibilities. The magnitude of what lay ahead was almost overwhelming when contemplated in the quiet darkness of their bedroom, away from the supportive presence of advisors and family. The historical weight of what was happening wasn't lost on either of them. They were participating in a tradition that stretched back centuries, becoming links in a chain that connected them to generations of predecessors who had faced similar moments of transition. This historical perspective provided both comfort and pressure. They were part of something larger than themselves, but they also bore the responsibility of maintaining its dignity and relevance. As the 3 weeks drew to a close, the sense of anticipation became almost unbearable. Everyone involved knew that once the public announcement was made, there would be no going back. The privacy and relative normalcy they had maintained would be replaced by intense scrutiny and formal protocols. The countdown to that moment created a unique form of stress that affected everyone in their circle. The final preparations were meticulous and emotional. Every detail had been reviewed and re-reviewed, every contingency planned for, every protocol double-checked. But no amount of preparation could address the fundamental human reality of what they were facing, the end of one chapter of their lives, and the beginning of another that would be fundamentally different from anything they had experienced before. The morning of the announcement dawned gray and drizzly, as if the weather itself understood the gravity of what was about to unfold. William woke before his alarm, his mind immediately focusing on the day ahead. Beside him, Catherine was already awake, staring at the ceiling with the same mixture of anticipation and apprehension that had become familiar over the past weeks. They had rehearsed this day countless times in their minds, but nothing could truly prepare them for the reality of it. The official statement would be released at precisely 10 o'clock in the morning, followed by a carefully choreographed series of events that would mark the transition from one era to another. Every minute was planned, every movement coordinated, every word carefully chosen. The children had been told the night before, in a family meeting that was both intimate and momentous. William and Catherine had worked carefully to explain the changes in terms their young minds could understand, emphasizing that while their father's role would be different, their family would remain strong and united. The children had asked thoughtful questions, shown remarkable maturity, and provided unexpected comfort to their parents through their simple acceptance of what was happening. Catherine's lady-in-waiting arrived early to help with the final preparations. The outfit chosen for this historic day was elegant, but understated, a navy blue dress that conveyed both dignity and accessibility. Every detail of her appearance would be analyzed and photographed, so nothing could be left to chance. Yet beneath all the careful preparation, she was simply a wife preparing to support her husband through one of the most challenging days of his life. The palace had been transformed overnight into a center of intense activity. Security personnel coordinated with protocol officers. Media liaisons prepared for the unprecedented level of global interest, and household staff ensured that every detail of hospitality and comfort had been addressed. The usually serene atmosphere of their home had given way to controlled chaos as dozens of people worked to orchestrate a seamless transition. William's private secretary briefed him on the final schedule, while his valet helped him prepare his formal attire. The weight of tradition was literally embodied in the clothing he would wear, garments that connected him to centuries of predecessors who had faced similar moments of transformation. Each piece carried history and meaning that extended far beyond personal preference or contemporary fashion. The constitutional experts and legal advisors had gathered in one of the palace's formal reception rooms, their final preparations complete, but their presence necessary for any last-minute questions or clarifications. The complexity of what was happening required expertise from multiple fields, and every conceivable scenario had been analyzed and planned for. Catherine found a few moments of solitude in the palace chapel, a small sanctuary where she could center herself before the day's demands began in earnest. The quiet space provided a refuge from the activity surrounding them, allowing her to connect with the spiritual strength that would sustain her through the challenges ahead. Her faith had always been a private anchor, and today she drew on it more deeply than ever. The media arrangements were unprecedented in their scope and complexity. News organizations from around the world had been positioning themselves for weeks, and the global appetite for information about what was happening was almost insatiable. The balance between transparency and privacy, between public interest and personal space, required constant negotiation and careful management. William's father arrived for a private meeting that lasted longer than scheduled. The conversation between them was deeply personal, touching on emotions and experiences that couldn't be captured in any formal briefing. The transfer of responsibility they were discussing wasn't just constitutional, but profoundly personal, involving the kind of father-son relationship complexities that had been playing out in their family for generations. The extended royal family began arriving throughout the morning, each bringing their own mixture of support and their own emotional responses to what was happening. Some had experienced similar transitions themselves, while others were witnessing this level of constitutional change for the first time. The family dynamics added another layer of complexity to an already emotionally charged day. Catherine's parents arrived with their characteristic quiet dignity, bringing with them the grounding presence that had sustained their daughter through every challenge she had faced since entering royal life. Their pride in her accomplishments was evident, but so was their awareness of the new burdens she was about to shoulder. The support of her birth family would be crucial in the months ahead. The final security briefings took place with military precision, covering everything from crowd control to emergency protocols. The protection officers who surrounded the family understood that this day would bring unique challenges, with global attention focused on every moment and movement. Their professionalism provided a reassuring backdrop to the emotional intensity of the occasion. As 10 o'clock approached, the tension throughout the palace became almost palpable. Staff members who had been working with quiet efficiency all morning found themselves pausing in their tasks, aware that they were witnessing history. The official statement that would be released to the world was already written, approved, and ready for distribution, but the weight of those words wouldn't be fully felt until they became public. William and Catherine had a final private moment together before the formal proceedings began. Standing in the same room where they had shared countless quiet conversations over the years, they acknowledged without words the magnitude of what was about to happen. Their partnership had sustained them through every challenge they had faced, and it would be tested in new ways in the months and years ahead. The phone call to inform the Prime Minister that the announcement was proceeding as planned was brief, but significant. Constitutional monarchies required coordination between crown and government, and the political implications of what was happening had been carefully considered and planned for. The stability of institutions during transition was paramount. Foreign embassies and diplomatic missions around the world had been quietly prepared for the announcement, ensuring that international relationships would remain stable through the period of change. The global nature of modern monarchy meant that domestic transitions had international implications that required careful management. The first news alert went out at exactly 10 o'clock, followed immediately by a cascade of notifications, headlines, and breaking news banners around the world. The carefully guarded secret was finally public, and the reaction was immediate and intense. Social media exploded with responses. News organizations launched into continuous coverage, and the global conversation shifted instantly to focus on what was happening. Catherine watched the initial wave of public reaction through carefully curated reports from the palace communications team. The outpouring of support and understanding was overwhelming, though she knew that detailed analysis and criticism would follow as people processed the full implications of what had been announced. Public opinion would be crucial in determining how successfully they navigated the transition ahead. The constitutional machinery that had been prepared over the previous weeks immediately sprang into action. Parliamentary notifications were sent, official documents were filed, and the complex legal framework that governed the monarchy began adapting to its new configuration. Centuries of precedent and protocol provided the foundation for managing unprecedented change. William found himself surrounded by advisors and officials, all ensuring that every aspect of the transition proceeded smoothly. But even in the midst of all the activity and attention, he was acutely aware that this was fundamentally about his family and their future. The personal and political dimensions of what was happening were inseparable, but required different types of strength and wisdom. The children were at school, protected from the immediate intensity of media attention by careful coordination between palace security and school officials. Maintaining their normal routine was a priority for both parents, who understood that consistency in their children's daily lives would be crucial during this period of upheaval. As the morning progressed, messages of support began pouring in from around the world. Fellow heads of state, religious leaders, and ordinary citizens all found ways to express their solidarity and best wishes. The volume of goodwill was both humbling and energizing, providing evidence that what they were undertaking had meaning far beyond their personal circumstances. Catherine's role during this critical period was both visible and behind the scenes. She participated in the formal aspects of the day, while also providing emotional support to everyone around her who was struggling with the magnitude of the change. Her strength became a stabilizing force for the entire extended family and household staff. The historical significance of the day wasn't lost on anyone involved. This was the kind of moment that would be remembered and analyzed for generations, the kind of transition that marked the end of one era and the beginning of another. The weight of that historical importance added gravitas to every decision and every action. As the day moved toward its most significant moments, the careful choreography of weeks of planning began to unfold with precision and grace. But beneath all the protocol and ceremony, there was a family navigating one of the most profound transitions any family could face doing so with dignity and love while the entire world watched and waited to see what would happen next. The moment came without warning, unscripted and unplanned in the space between one formal obligation and the next. William had just finished receiving the final constitutional briefing that would mark the completion of his transition, and Catherine had been standing nearby, her steady presence providing silent support throughout the day's ceremonial requirements. The weight of everything that had transpired seemed to settle on them both simultaneously. In the formal drawing room of the palace, surrounded by centuries of history and tradition, something entirely human and immediate took precedence over protocol. William turned toward his wife with an expression that revealed the full magnitude of what they had just experienced together. The careful composure that had carried them through the day's official proceedings gave way to raw emotion that neither could contain any longer. Catherine saw the mixture of relief, exhaustion, gratitude, and uncertainty in her husband's eyes. Without thinking about who might be watching or what the proper protocol might be, she stepped forward and opened her arms to him. The embrace that followed lasted only seconds in real time, but it captured something profound about love, partnership, and shared strength that resonated far beyond the walls of the palace. The photographers present had been instructed to document the day's proceedings with appropriate dignity and discretion, but nothing had prepared them for the power of this unguarded moment. The images they captured showed two people who had just weathered one of the most challenging experiences of their lives, finding comfort and strength in each other's arms. The authenticity of the moment was impossible to fabricate or stage. William held his wife with an intensity that spoke to years of shared challenges and mutual support. In her arms, he found the grounding he needed to process everything that had happened and everything that lay ahead. The formal trappings of his new role seemed to fade away, leaving just a man grateful for the woman who had stood beside him through the most demanding day of his life. Catherine felt the weight her husband had been carrying, the responsibility and pressure that had built up over weeks of preparation and years of anticipation. Her embrace offered not just comfort, but a reminder that whatever challenges they would face in the future, they would face them together. The partnership that had sustained them through every previous trial would continue to be their foundation. The emotion of the moment was captured not just in photographs, but in the faces of everyone present. Palace staff who had maintained professional composure throughout the day found themselves deeply moved by the genuine affection and mutual support they witnessed. This wasn't a photo opportunity or a public relations moment. It was authentic human connection at its most vulnerable and beautiful. The embrace lasted long enough for both William and Catherine to draw the strength they needed from each other, but brief enough that it felt spontaneous rather than performed. When they finally separated, there was a shift in the atmosphere of the room. The formality that had characterized the day's events gave way to something more relaxed and genuine, as if the authentic emotion they had shared had given everyone present permission to be more human. The immediate reaction from palace staff was telling. Many had served the royal family for decades, witnessing countless formal occasions and state ceremonies. But this moment struck them as uniquely powerful because it revealed the genuine partnership and love that existed beneath all the constitutional and ceremonial responsibilities. It humanized what could have been an entirely institutional transition. Word of the embrace spread quickly among the palace household, not through official channels, but through the kind of organic sharing that happens when people witness something genuinely moving. Staff members who hadn't been present in the room heard about it from colleagues, and the description of the moment became a source of comfort and pride for everyone who served the family. The photographers faced an immediate decision about how to handle the images they had captured. This wasn't the kind of formal portrait or ceremonial photograph they typically dealt with. It was an intimate moment that happened to occur in a public setting. The decision about how widely to share these images would have implications far beyond their immediate impact. Catherine's emotional response to the embrace was complex and deeply felt. She had supported her husband through the entire transition process, maintaining her own composure while helping him navigate the challenging emotional terrain. Being able to offer and receive comfort in this unguarded moment felt like a necessary release after weeks of careful self-control. The timing of the embrace was significant in ways that extended beyond the immediate emotional relief it provided. Coming at the conclusion of the formal transition proceedings, it marked a shift from the constitutional and ceremonial aspects of the day to its more personal and human dimensions. It was a bridge between William's old role and his new one, mediated by the constant love and support of his wife. The global reaction to the photographs, when they were eventually shared, was immediate and overwhelming. Social media platforms were flooded with responses from people around the world who found themselves moved by the genuine emotion and authentic partnership the images revealed. Comments poured in from individuals who saw in the embrace a reflection of their own experiences with love, support, and shared challenges. Mental health advocates particularly responded to the images, seeing in them a powerful example of how emotional support and vulnerability could coexist with strength and leadership. The embrace became a talking point about the importance of authentic human connection, even for those in the most public and demanding roles. International media coverage of the embrace was extensive and largely positive, with news organizations around the world featuring the photographs prominently in their coverage of the day's events. The human interest aspect of the story resonated across cultural and geographical boundaries, proving that authentic emotion transcends political and social differences. The embrace also sparked conversations about the evolution of royal protocol and the increasing humanization of monarchy in the modern era. Royal watchers and constitutional experts debated the significance of such displays of emotion, with many arguing that they enhanced rather than diminished the dignity of the institution by showing the real people behind the formal roles. Catherine's fashion choices for the day had been carefully planned and widely analyzed, but it was this unguarded moment of human connection that ultimately defined how she was perceived during this historic transition. The embrace showcased her role not just as a royal consort, but as a genuine partner and source of strength for her husband. The children, when they eventually saw the photographs, reacted with the kind of matter-of-fact acceptance that only young people can display. For them, seeing their parents embrace was perfectly natural, regardless of the formal setting or the global attention it generated. Their perspective provided a grounding reminder of what really mattered beneath all the ceremony and protocol. Palace communications experts found themselves in the unusual position of managing public reaction to an entirely spontaneous moment. Unlike carefully planned photo opportunities or orchestrated events, this required a different approach that honored the authenticity of what had occurred while managing its public impact appropriately. The embrace became a defining image not just of that particular day, but of William and Catherine's entire relationship and approach to royal duty. It encapsulated the partnership that had sustained them through years of public service and personal challenges, showing the world that even in the most formal and traditional institutions, love and authentic human connection remain paramount. Religious leaders from various faiths commented on the embrace as an example of the spiritual importance of mutual support and partnership in marriage. The image resonated with fundamental human values that transcended religious boundaries, speaking to the universal importance of love and companionship in facing life's challenges. The artistic community also responded to the photographs, with many noting the composition and emotional impact that elevated them beyond typical news photography. The images were praised for capturing a moment of genuine beauty and human truth in the midst of formal proceedings, creating art from life rather than staging life for art. As the immediate impact of the day's events began to settle, the embrace remained as perhaps the most memorable and meaningful moment of the entire transition. It had provided comfort to William and Catherine in a moment of need, but It also offered the same kind of comfort to millions of people around the world who saw in their authentic connection a reflection of the power of love to sustain us through even the most challenging circumstances. The spontaneous nature of the embrace made it impossible to replicate or commodify, which added to rather than detracted from its impact. This was a genuine moment of human connection that happened to be witnessed by the world, rather than a performance designed for public consumption. That authenticity was evident to everyone who saw it and contributed to its lasting power to move and inspire.